It's amazing so many people have turned up in time. It's not a normal case here. Sorry, I'm Noel Lynch, the membership officer of the London Federation of Green Parties. I've been very, very busy over the last few weeks because in July, when I first applied to be membership secretary, we had 3,000, and now yesterday we passed 4,000 new members, which is the highest we've ever had, and the National Party passed 23,000 yesterday as well, and which means we've now UK-wide with the Scottish Green Party about 32 or 3,000 members, and the Lib Dems have 42, so they're in our sights at the moment to pass them after Christmas. But that's the politics over. We've got this is our first of these lecture series, and hopefully it'll do well. It'll be 3 lectures of 20 minutes each, and then there'll be a question time for all 3 at the end, and then we'll have a bit of a social. There's some wine and things there, so a bit of a social where people can interact and talk. And
there's more seats here.
Yeah, there's a few more seats there, and there's 2 up here, and there's 1 there, and there's 1 there. Thank you. We will be passing, everything as you know is free, but we will be passing the bucket around at some time during the meeting, and I'd really love a silent collection. So as all the coins dropping in the bucket won't distract the speakers, just putting notes on it. I try that every time, it seldom works, but we need 250,000 for 2016 for the GLA elections, when we will win. We've probably got enough money for the general election at the moment, and we are contesting every single seat. And as I say, this is the first one. The next one will be on the 20th. I have some very good speakers lined up. One is here already, I notice. And but back to tonight. I'm delighted to have speakers here from ISIS, which is, by the way, the Institute of Science and Society, which has been in existence an awful long time before that other crowd in Syria. This is Dr. Mae-Wan, which I'm delighted to be working with again. We organised a big event when I was a member of the London Assembly, and with the famous Dr. Putz was there as well, and some others on the same subject, and we're still fighting it. So I'll leave Dr. Mae-Wan now introduced.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me here, and it's a great pleasure to speak to you. Well, I'm not going to speak to you directly, but I'm going to introduce Ava, our speaker. She is our researcher, Ava Sirinathsinghji. Singhji, okay. She has been with us since 2011. She's now our researcher, staff writer, and assistant editor of this wonderful magazine. So basically, we were in China recently, and it was a huge meeting. There's thousands of people there, and there were speakers from all over the world. As you know, we've been campaigning for banning GMOs for a long time, and glyphosate herbicides is very much part of this whole package because of the Roundup tolerant GM crops, glyphosate tolerant GM crops. And it was amazing. It was all the evidence were just coming together. I mean, the farmers themselves have known for years that their livestock have these terrible abnormalities, abnormal births. They're sterile and so on. And the doctors have been noticing birth defects, horrible birth defects. The scientists belatedly have been finding cancers, have been finding also when they do experiments on animals, they've been finding the same kinds of defects appearing. And then the epidemiology, people started looking at the health of, say, the USA, because they tell us the United States, people have been eating GMOs and nobody has died yet. So anyway, so some very clever scientists, especially Nancy Swanson, she's just an independent scientist, she's a physicist. She was used to work for the US Navy. She was the US Naval Scientific Advisor. And she just, of her own bat, collected all the epidemiological data from the whole nation in whatever diseases she could find. And they went up like this, all of them, parallel to the introduction of GM crops. As you know, as GM crops have been introduced, there have been like steep rise in glyphosate usage worldwide. And nowadays, they not only use it on GM crops, even because we haven't got any GM crops yet, at least not officially, but you know what they're using it for? They're using it for drying crops, for desiccating crops so they can be harvested. And they're using it in residential areas, like where people live. If they find weeds on the pavement, Monsanto says, well, it's so safe, you can just spray it everywhere. So it's now basically saturated in our environment. And we've just got to take action in our own hands. We can't wait for any governments to do anything. We've just got to get, right, our own house in order. We should get GMOs. Yes, GMOs come next, but glyphosate herbicides, first of all, banned from London streets because children are there. The mothers, by the way, have also been noticing rashes and all kinds of illnesses in their children. Ava will give you all the details. She's been working very hard preparing her presentation, so without further ado, I shall let her go ahead. Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, I hope you can all kind of see. Might not be able to see much, but I'll try and explain through the images. So first, the glyphosate herbicides, I'll just say what they are. Well, first, glyphosate was patented originally not as a herbicide, but as a metal chelator. So it was used in industry for cleaning out pipes, to clean out...
Can you hear properly? Maybe you should speak up louder.
If you could turn the screen towards you, then you can face us when you speak.
Okay. I want to be able to show some... Well, you won't be able to see them. So glyphosate originally was patented not as a herbicide, but as a metal chelator, and it was used as an industrial pipe cleaner, so it's not something that was designed to be in our food. It was later patented by Monsanto as a herbicide in the 70s, and its mechanism is to block the plant's ability to produce some of its own amino acids, and this pathway doesn't exist in any animals. And this is one assumption that is used to say glyphosate is safe for humans, because we don't have this pathway. But what I'll try and show is that there are other modes of toxicity for glyphosate. It's now the most popular herbicide in the world, and it was also, its most recent function was that it was also patented by Monsanto as to be a broad spectrum antibiotic. So that has also health implications if we're chronically eating low doses of antibiotics. One of the major reasons why it's so popular is because it's used in conjunction with GM crops. So the most popular GM crop in the world is tolerant to glyphosate herbicides. So they spray the crops and everything else dies but the crop. So a lot of people that are eating GM crops are also eating the herbicide. The regions where these crops are grown is mainly in the Americas. So Argentina and the US are seeing a lot of rises in diseases correlating with glyphosate use. So Argentina has seen an 858% rise in glyphosate use in the last 22 years. The States was shown in a recent study to have, there's been an 11% rise in overall pesticide use, and that was directly attributed to glyphosate-tolerant crops. So glyphosate's being sprayed on all these crops. It's also one of the most popular herbicides in the UK. As Mae-Wan said, we're not eating or growing glyphosate-tolerant crops really in the country, but we are being exposed to it through it being sprayed on crops pre-harvest to dry out the seeds. So in the EU, for example, I found numbers showing that 74% of oilseed rape is being sprayed with glyphosate herbicides. 50 to 60% of sunflowers are being sprayed. There's also wheat, barley. So a GM-free study in 2014 analysed some of our breads and stuff. I found that 60% of breads in the UK have pesticides. The most common was glyphosate, and including major bread brands and cereal bars like Jordan's and Warburton's. So with this widespread use, there's widespread contamination of the environment. Studies have shown that America, that rain samples, air samples, groundwater, waterway samples are all testing positive for glyphosate. Argentina is the same. One recent study found that 100% of samples tested positive for glyphosate in rain and water. In Europe, a recent study in Catalonia in Spain, they tested 11 different groundwater sites across the whole region, and they were all positive for glyphosate, some above detection limits. And this is another assumption that is used to show that glyphosate is safe. They say that it binds to the soil and it won't leach into our groundwater supplies, our freshwater supplies, but we're seeing that it does. And a recent article that's on our website details detection of glyphosate in Wales. Low levels within legal limits, but within the range that have been shown to be toxic in some studies. So it's in the tap water as well as the local rivers in Wales. And we know in London it's also being used, and there's been a campaign to try and ban it from Hackney, which I think spends £40,000 a year on glyphosate and was found being sprayed in the local parks. So with that, we're now finding that it's in our bodies, and it's not just in America and Argentina, it's in Europe as well. Friends of the Earth study found out of 182 volunteers, they looked in the urine, and 44% of the people across 18 EU countries had glyphosate in their urine, and 7 out of the 10 UK citizens tested positive for glyphosate in their urine as well. There's been one study looking at glyphosate in breast milk in America, and that's by a coalition of mums who are so concerned about illnesses in their children, they've come together to try and ban glyphosate from their food. And they took it upon themselves to analyse their own breast milk, and most of them samples positive also. Another assumption that's used to say glyphosate is safe is that it's highly water soluble and should flush out of the system very quickly, but a recent study looking in cows found that levels in the urine were similar to internal organs, suggesting that it's not being washed out, so we don't know how much of it is accumulating in us over time. So this is coming with a lot of bad illnesses. So Argentina, where they spray glyphosate from planes, so it just lands all over residential areas, and they're seeing, the doctor's report recently showed that there was a 2 to 5-fold increase in birth defects in sprayed regions, and there was a national report which actually tried to downplay the rise in birth defects, but and said there wasn't a rise in the national average. But when you looked at the regions that were sprayed, they found up to 61% of total births were resulting in birth defects. So there's a really big epidemic over there. And this is also being backed up by scientific studies, epidemiological studies, as Mae-Wan said, as well as farm experiences. I don't know, you can't really see this. There's some gruesome pictures of some birth defects in some pigs of a farmer in Denmark who grows pork to be exported here. And this is, he published his work because he noticed a huge difference when he removed GMOs and glyphosate from his pig's diet, that all of these problems disappeared. Monsanto themselves even have found birth defects in their own studies that they used to approve glyphosate in Europe, but it was dismissed as biologically insignificant. There's also reproductive toxicity. In Argentina, some of the sprayed regions see up to 23% of pregnancies resulting in late miscarriages, fetal death, stillbirths, which was reported by a doctor at this meeting in China. Lab studies show that glyphosate kills immature testicular cells, placental cells and umbilical cells, which goes along with this problem of fertility and reproductive toxicity. And Monsanto admitted to seeing increased spontaneous abortions, reduced viability of their rats and rabbits also. Cancers are another illness that's on the rise in America and Argentina, and generally in the Western world and everywhere, pretty much. But Argentina's seen levels reach 5 times national average in glyphosate sprayed areas. The proportion of overall deaths from cancer in some of these regions is 50% with cancer. 50% of overall deaths are a result of cancer. There's epidemiological studies linking it to non-Hodgkin lymphoma, childhood leukemias. Lab studies show that it causes DNA damage, which is a prerequisite for cancer development, and also that it can be an endocrine disruptor, which could be part of the reason it's causing birth defects and also some hormone-dependent cancers. This graph you probably can't see, but it shows thyroid cancer incidence in the US in the yellow bars, and the yellow line here is, red line here is glyphosate application in America. So there's a very tight correlation. Doesn't show cause, but it's just a correlation. And the only long-term feeding study ever done on glyphosate and GMOs, which was done in France, caused a big controversy. They found tumours forming with levels of glyphosate that's half of what is permitted in the EU drinking water. So this is within legal limits in the EU, was resulting in tumours in rats. It's also been associated with digestive problems. So farms are seeing chronic diarrhoea, inflammation of the stomach and lining. The fact that it's an antibiotic might explain why studies are showing dysbiosis or imbalance of the gut microbes in livestock and poultry. There's also been a rise in pathogenic infections in the gut that might result from this imbalance. So in Germany, is seeing a huge rise of chronic botulism in their cows since the 1990s. This has been attributed to glyphosate as well. In people, America is seeing rises in, for example, celiac disease, deaths from intestinal infection. Acute exposure also results in diarrhoea and vomiting, glyphosate. And dysbiosis of the gut has been associated with allergies, autism, bowel disease. And the US has seen huge rises in food allergies, about 400% since GM crops were introduced. Inflammatory bowel disease has risen by 65% from 2000 to 2009. And autism, there might be other explanations for the autism glyphosate correlation, but one also might be the gut dysbiosis, and there's a very tight correlation. And the mothers that we're talking about before who analysed their breast milk, they've got hundreds of testimonials on their website. This is the founder. She presented a slide of her son, and he had life-threatening allergies until she took GMOs and glyphosate out of his diet. He also had autism symptoms. And her story, along with hundreds on their website, show that when the mothers are removing this from their children's diet, their symptoms are improving. Even the autism's getting better, digestive problems, allergies are going away. Lastly, there's other things, but I don't have time to mention. There's a huge epidemic of kidney disease affecting Sri Lanka and Central America, and a study came out recently linking glyphosate to this epidemic. It's caused 20,000 deaths estimated in Sri Lanka, and they didn't used to suffer from this problem. And the fact that glyphosate chelates metals such as arsenic, I think there's a correlation between the hard water, glyphosate use and kidney disease. So it might be binding with toxic metals and then causing kidney disease. And here's a correlation in the US as well of renal failure and glyphosate applications over the years as well. There's also widespread environmental toxicity. Apart from the fact that the glyphosate isn't working anymore, weeds are developing resistance. There's at least 25 species now that have developed resistance to glyphosate. So this is not a good long-term strategy. And now they're putting out more GM crops that are tolerant to more pesticides, then we have to put more and more and more. So this is causing economic problems for farmers who now have to pull out big weeds by hand. The crops are also less healthy. The chelation of metals, some of these metals are important nutrients for plants for the physiological processes. So if their immune system, fighting diseases, these things are being compromised. So there's been 40 diseases that have been shown to go up as a result of, well, possibly to do with glyphosate use. There's yield drag, and they've been shown to be less water efficient in a couple of studies. They've also been linked to toxicity to insects, amphibians. The monarch butterfly decline is a result of glyphosate destruction of their habitat in America. And there was a study came out a month or two ago linking it also to bee colony collapse disorder. Soil fertility is also a problem. It's an antibiotic, so it's killing microbes in the soil. It's also toxic to worms. and other organisms. This here is a picture just to show you that these crops and glyphosate are not really the way to the future. On the right here is glyphosate tolerant corn, and on the left is non-glyphosate tolerant corn. During the drought in America, that was I think 2012, 2013, I can't remember. So the glyphosate tolerant corn did a lot worse, and that might be a result of it not being able to be water efficient. So this chemical farming is not really the way to go in terms of dealing with a new era of unpredictable climate. So with all this evidence, I think, as Mae-Wan said, the regulations are not sufficient to protect us. We're seeing toxicity at levels that are permitted for us to eat. So I think a ban in London is the best way to go. That's it. Yeah, that's it. If you want more, we have a review as well. It's a few copies on the table that summarises a lot of the toxicity of glyphosate.
We're going to put out a new one concentrating on glyphosate because the evidence is coming out so fast. This is already outdated because it was put out last year.
Thanks to Dr. Eva for that. All the speakers will have question answers as soon as the three speakers have spoken. This has been filmed as well, and when I figure out where it's going, we'll let you know. Thanks very much. Now, the next speaker is another friend of mine, chair of the London Central Green Party, very well-known, internationally known conservator. He's the head of conservatory at the Wallace Collection, but his passion is energy and particularly nuclear power. And I don't even know what he's exactly going to talk about, but if you get talking to him, try and get an invitation to his house, because he has a wonderful house, which is one of only 170 years, is it?
100 years. So.
178 in England. That is carbon neutral and all that, and he has some wonderful things at very reasonable. He's put it in at very reasonable prices, but I'm not sure what he's going to talk about. Okay, Jürgen, you're up.
Right. I don't need a PowerPoint presentation. I'm just going to stand up here. It's all a bit improvised, obviously. First thing, I want to start with something which is really not controversial at all, which is basically energy saving. We all know energy saving is absolutely important. But what I want to show you is a few things how you can save energy, and we use it in the heritage sector. Like Noel said, I work in the heritage sector now for many years, and so from the heritage sector I became interested in sustainability because